Snowflakes stuck to my eyelashes the moment the door slammed shut. Warm light spilled from inside, laughter echoing like a cruel chorus. My son's voice sliced through the night. "Christmas ain't for losers, Mom." Behind him, my daughter-in-law smiled slow and satisfied, while the scent of cinnamon and roast turkey floated through the crack before it closed. I stood there with my hands full of wrapped gifts that suddenly felt heavier than bricks. My name is Miriam Davenport. I'm 64 years old, and that night, my own son shut the door on me for not being rich enough to belong. I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I just drove home, opened my laptop, and clicked cancel on every payment that kept their perfect life alive. But what they didn't know was I keep receipts for everything. Before I continue, tell me where you're watching from, and hit like and subscribe if you've ever been betrayed by family. Because sometimes betrayal doesn't come with knives or shouting. It comes with quiet words, polished smiles, and a door closing right in your face. What happened that night didn't just break my heart, it rewrote everything I thought I knew about love, loyalty, and the people I'd sacrificed my whole life for. So if you've ever been made to feel like a guest in your own family, stay with me. You're about to see how one small click turned a lifetime of silence into a reckoning no one saw coming. I grew up in a house that smelled like black coffee and floor polish. My mother worked nights at the hospital. My father, a machinist, was mostly quiet, except when bills were due. He'd sit at the kitchen table, fingers stained with grease, muttering numbers under his breath. I was 10 when I learned silence could be louder than shouting. Maybe that's where it started, this habit of fixing things quietly. By 17, I was working double shifts at a laundromat to help pay for my brother's college books. Everyone said he was the bright one. I didn't argue. I folded sheets and smiled, because that's what the reliable daughter does, fills the gaps no one else wants to see. I didn't know it back then, but that need to prove my worth through giving would become the rope I'd later hang my peace with. Years later, I met Walter. He was steady, kind, and made the world feel safe. We married young, built a life out of modest paychecks, and shared jokes. He had a saying he used every time the lights flickered during storms. "You can't stop the dark, Miri, but you can hold the flashlight steady." I held that flashlight for decades through layoffs, sickness, and the years when every penny had a name. When our son, Calvin CJ, as everyone called him, was born, I thought I'd been handed purpose itself. He had Walter's dimples and my father's serious eyes. The first night we brought him home, the power went out in the middle of a thunderstorm. I remember sitting on the old recliner, CJ wrapped in a quilt, his tiny breath warm against my neck, while Walter draped another blanket over us. "Our turn to protect him," Walter whispered. That sentence became my gospel. Walter passed away when CJ was 15. Heart attack, sudden, merciless. One moment, he was fixing the porch light. The next, I was a widow with a mortgage and a teenage boy who hated the world for leaving him fatherless. I took a night job cleaning office buildings downtown. I'd come home as the sun rose smelling of disinfectant and lemon wax, and make CJ breakfast before he left for school. I told myself exhaustion was love in another form. CJ was charming, smart, but restless. He wanted the kind of life Walter and I could never afford. Designer sneakers, new phones, fast cars. I tried to keep up, terrified he'd see me as a disappointment. I sold Walter's old tools to buy CJ his prom tux. I skipped lunches so I could send him spending money when he went to college. When he called saying he'd dropped out after a year, I told him it was okay. He said he had a business idea, something about property flipping. I didn't understand it, but I believed him. The first time he asked for help, it was small. "Just co-sign this car loan, Mom. I'll pay every cent." He looked so sure, so much like his father, that I couldn't say no. He paid for 3 months. Then came the missed calls, the late fees, the repossession notice. I covered it quietly. I told myself he was still learning. When he met Raquel Rocky, as she insisted people call her, CJ was 33, and I thought maybe stability had arrived. She was dazzling. Perfect hair, perfect smile, a way of making ordinary moments feel like events. The first time I met her, she brought a bottle of expensive wine I couldn't pronounce and wore heels that clacked against my old linoleum floor like applause. She hugged me too tightly, called me Mama Miri, and I wanted so badly to believe she meant it. They married in the spring. It was small but elegant, Rocky's version of minimalist chic. I remember the way she controlled every detail, the seating chart, the playlist, even the shade of napkins. "It's all about image," she said, adjusting CJ's tie while cameras flashed. I smiled for the photos, even when I noticed I'd been placed at the back table away from family shots. I swallowed it, but it carved deeper than I thought. A year later, they came to me with their big dream. Mom. We found the perfect house, CJ said, spreading glossy brochures across my kitchen table. Maple Ridge Estates, 2 floors, bay windows, a yard big enough for a swing set. We just need a cosigner, he added. Rocky touched my hand, her nails long and coral-colored. It's only a formality, Mama Miri. The bank just needs extra security. You won't pay a thing. I remember the smell of her perfume, sweet, overwhelming, as she leaned close. Think of the grandkids, she said, her smile all light. You want them growing up in a safe home, don't you? That sentence hooked me like bait. I imagined birthdays, Sunday dinners, a house full of laughter. I signed the papers without reading the fine print. Love doesn't read contracts. 6 months later, they were back. This time it was the car, a sleek black SUV, Rocky's dream ride. CJ said, We only need a little help with the down payment, Mom. Just $8,000. We'll pay you back in 6 months. I dipped into the savings Walter and I had built over 30 years. I didn't tell anyone, not even my sister. I told myself it was family. Family means help. 6 months became 12. Then came the small emergencies, the broken heater, $200, the dental surgery, $2,000, new school clothes for the kids, $500. Every time I hesitated, CJ's voice turned sharp. Don't you trust me, Mom? Don't you want the best for your grandkids? That word grandkids was their trump card. I always folded. Their house became something out of a magazine, marble countertops, crystal lights, summer barbecues. I was barely invited to. When I did visit, I felt like furniture visible, but irrelevant. Rocky would hand me a list of house rules taped to the fridge. No shoes on carpet, no TV before 7, kitchen off limits after 6. I laughed the first time thinking she was joking. She wasn't. One afternoon, I brought over a pot of chili, CJ's favorite since he was a boy. The moment I lifted the lid, Rocky wrinkled her nose. That smells intense. Maybe too much garlic. She smiled thin as glass. Minutes later, I found the pot dumped into the trash. We're having salad tonight, she said, linking her arm through CJ's. He didn't even look at me. That silence burned worse than words. I started noticing the pattern. The only time they called was when they needed something. Money, babysitting, favors. Never. How are you, Mom? Only, can you... I ignored it, even when they forgot my birthday for the 2nd year in a row. Even when I saw their social media post captioned, just us. I was the ghost, hovering behind their happiness. By the time their second child, Lila, was born, I had paid off nearly every overdue bill they'd ever had. My savings were dwindling, but my hope wasn't, at least not yet. Then, Walter's old phrase came back to me one sleepless night. Hold the flashlight steady. I wondered when holding the light for them had become burning myself instead. I didn't know it then, but that thought, quite fleeting, was the first crack in the dam. The moment the giver began to realize she was running out of things to give. And when December rolled around again, the lights on Maple Ridge glowed brighter than ever. I bought gifts, wrapped each one carefully, even splurged on perfume for Rocky. I told myself maybe this Christmas would be different. Maybe the love I'd poured in would finally spill back my way. I had no idea that the warmth inside that house wasn't meant for me. It was the glow of a world I'd built but no longer belonged to. The night before that Christmas, I ironed my old navy dress, the same one I'd worn to CJ's wedding. I polished my loafers until the leather caught the kitchen light. I even brushed out my gray hair and pinned Walter's oak leaf brooch to my cardigan. It wasn't vanity. It was hope disguised as effort. I wanted to look like someone who belonged in her own family's photograph. The drive to Maple Ridge took 40 minutes. Snow fell in thick, lazy flakes, softening the streetlights into halos. When I pulled up, the house looked like a Christmas commercial, white lights framing the porch, a gold wreath glinting on the door. I sat in the car for a long minute, listening to the radio carol fade into static. My hands trembled slightly as I reached for the bag of presents on the passenger seat. CJ opened the door, his smile polite but strained. Hey, Mom. His voice carried the tone of someone surprised but not pleased. Behind him, laughter echoed from the dining room, followed by the clinking of glasses. Merry Christmas, honey, I said, my breath fogging in the cold. I brought gifts for everyone. Before he could respond, Rocky appeared. Her wine-red dress shimmered under the chandelier light. Celeste. Sorry, Mary, she corrected herself with a smile sharp enough to cut. We're kind of in the middle of dinner. It's not really a family thing tonight. More like business associates, you know. I hesitated, the cold biting through my gloves. Just 5 minutes. I brought toys for the kids. She stepped forward, her perfume overwhelming her voice. Sugar-coated poison. They're already asleep. Maybe next week. She reached for the bag of gifts peeking inside. Her smile faltered. Plastic. Oh, Miri, you know we try to keep things high quality for them. It's better to teach them taste early. CJ looked away, shame flickering across his face like a weak signal. Mom, you understand. It's just not the right time. And then he said it. The words that froze everything inside me. Christmas ain't for losers, Mom. The silence after that sentence stretched wider than the night. I remember the weight of the snow on my shoulders, the faint sound of laughter spilling through the crack of the door, the smell of cinnamon and turkey drifting past me like mockery. Rocky's hand rested on CJ's arm, gentle, possessive. It's better if you head home, she said softly, as though I were the one being unreasonable. You'd feel out of place tonight. Then the door closed. Slowly, politely, like a coffin lid. I stood there until my fingers went numb. Then I walked back to my car, each step crunching on the snow like glass underfoot. I didn't cry on the drive home. The tears came later when I was sitting on my small couch with a cup of lukewarm tea. The apartment was quiet except for the hum of the fridge and the faint ticking of the wall clock. I looked at the bag of gifts on the floor, colorful paper ribbons, already wrinkling, and something inside me shifted. It wasn't rage, it wasn't heartbreak. It was something sharper, cleaner. Clarity. I turned on my laptop. The blue glow filled the room. My fingers moved on instinct, steady, methodical. Click. Online banking. Click. Automatic transfers. Cancel. Mortgage payment. Cancel. Car insurance. Cancel. Dental plan. Cancel. Each click echoed like a door closing. Only this time it was me doing the closing. When the last confirmation popped up, "Are you sure?" I whispered. Yes. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was peaceful. The kind of silence you get after finally turning off a machine that's been humming in the background for too long. I slept that night for the first time in years. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the window, hitting the empty teacup beside me. I realized I didn't feel guilty, not even a little. I made myself breakfast, just eggs and toast, but it tasted better than any Christmas dinner I'd ever had. Days turned into weeks. The calls started soon after. First from CJ, then from Rocky. At first, the tone was curious. Hey, Mom, did you maybe forget to transfer this month? Then came frustration, then panic. The bank notices arrived at their door, not mine. The car insurance lapse. The credit cards piled interest like snowdrifts. I stayed quiet. I didn't answer the phone, didn't open their messages. I spent my days cleaning offices, humming to the radio, letting the rhythm of normal life wash the guilt away. Each paycheck I kept for myself felt like reclaiming a piece of me they'd chipped off over the years. One afternoon, while I was dusting a glass conference table, I caught my reflection. Tired eyes, soft lines, silver hair pinned back. For the first time, I didn't see a victim. I saw a woman still standing. It was late January when they showed up at my door. I saw their shadows first stretching across the frosted glass. I didn't move. The bell rang once, twice. Mom opened the door, CJ's voice called brittle with desperation. The bank's threatening foreclosure. You have to help us. I stayed still, my heart beat steady. Please, he said again. The kids, they'll have nowhere to go. I thought of those kids, of how they'd never seen the toys I'd bought for them, how their mother had called them cheap. And I thought of myself standing in the snow that night, turned away like a beggar. Mom, you can't just ignore me. His voice cracked raw. We're family. Family. The word no longer felt sacred. It felt like a weapon. I didn't answer. Eventually, the knocking stopped. I waited until their footsteps faded before exhaling. My hands were shaking, but not from fear, from power. After that night, something in me rewired. I started saving again, but this time for me. I bought new curtains, replaced the broken toaster, planted a small basil pot by the window. Small things, but every act felt like a rebellion. I also began documenting every payment I'd ever made for them, every receipt, every text message. I kept a notebook neatly labeled Audit Journal. Old habits die hard. Maybe I needed proof, or maybe I just wanted a record that I wasn't crazy that love unchecked can turn into servitude. One evening, while flipping through that notebook, I came across Walter's old handwriting on the back of a grocery list. Miri, save something for yourself. Even God rested on the seventh day. That night, I lit a candle by the window, not for prayer, but for memory, for the man who taught me strength without cruelty, for the woman I was learning to become again. When February came, the calls turned ugly. Rocky's voice on voicemail was no longer polished. It was frantic. "We're drowning, Miri. You don't know what you're doing to us. The kids are scared." But I did know. I knew exactly what I was doing. I was ending a cycle. I didn't know it back then, but that winter would be the beginning of my reckoning. The first step towards something colder than revenge and far more lasting. It would be justice. The first tremor of fallout came 3 weeks after Christmas. A bright red envelope slid under my apartment door. Inside was a letter from the mortgage company addressed to both C.J. Davenport Jr. and Miriam Davenport. I stared at my name, beside his printed in bold black ink, and felt my stomach twist. The letter said payment overdue, cosigner liable. That night my phone lit up like a Christmas tree. Missed calls, voicemails. Then came the message. "Mom, what did you do?" I didn't reply, but I knew he'd find me eventually. 2 days later I came home from work to see him standing outside my building. He was wearing that same gray wool coat Walter once owned, the one CJ had begged me to let him keep years ago. It hung off him now, loose at the shoulders, as if even the fabric had stopped believing in him. "Mommy said as I walked up the stairs, we need to talk." I brushed past him. "It's late." He followed me to my door. "You can't just ignore me. The bank's saying you canceled everything." "What the hell, Mom? They're threatening foreclosure." "They should talk to the homeowners," I said quietly, sliding the key into the lock. His voice cracked. "You're part of this. Your name's on that loan." I turned to face him. The hallway light flickered, catching the anger rising in his eyes. "My name?" I said, "not my obligation." "You told me I wouldn't have to pay a thing, remember?" He hesitated, guilt flashing before pride replaced it. "That's not the point. We're family. Family doesn't slam doors on Christmas." He flinched. "Rocky went too far, okay? She gets stressed. She says stupid stuff. But you can't just destroy everything because of one bad night." "One bad night," I whispered. "Try 5 years of them." For the first time, he didn't have an answer. I closed the door slowly. This time, he was the one left in the cold. After that, silence stretched between us like a taut rope. But the rope was fraying. A week later, I got a text from my neighbor, Dr. Pauline Hart. She lived across the hall, a retired neurologist with a sharp tongue and a sharper mind. "Miri saw your son outside again. Looks agitated. You okay?" I wrote back, "Fine. Just unfinished business." Pauline knocked 5 minutes later, holding her mug of chamomile tea. "Unfinished business, my foot," she said. "You look like you're holding a secret grenade." I laughed, though my voice was tight. "Maybe I am." She leaned against the doorframe. "If you ever need proof of anything that happens out there, my doorbell cam's on 24/7. Picks up sound too." I nodded, not realizing how much that sentence would matter later. By mid-February, the bank had issued a second notice. CJ stopped pretending. He started begging. Then, when begging didn't work, he turned cruel. "You're ruining my life," he shouted over the phone. "You raised me better than this." "No," I said. "I raised you to be better than this." He hung up. Days later, a friend who worked at the local grocery store told me she'd seen Rocky there arguing with a clerk because her credit card kept declining. She looked furious, the woman said, lowering her voice. Said something about her mother-in-law sabotaging her. I almost smiled. Not from joy, but from release. For once the chaos wasn't mine to clean up. Still, I knew something worse was coming. It always does before the dust settles. It came on a Thursday night. The sound of pounding at my door jolted me awake. I looked through the peephole, Rocky. Her makeup was smudged, her hair wild. Behind her, CJ paced like a trapped animal. "Miriam," she shouted. "We need to talk." I didn't open. "You think this is funny?" she screamed. "You think ruining us makes you some kind of saint?" CJ's voice joined hers, low and frantic. Mom opened the damn door. Dr. Hart's door opened across the hall. "Keep your voices down," she snapped. "This is a residential building, not a circus." Rocky turned. "Stay out of this, old woman." Pauline smiled, slow and dangerous. "My camera doesn't stay out of anything." They froze. Rocky pulled CJ's arm. "Let's go," she muttered. As they left, I pressed my palm to the door, feeling the vibration of their fading footsteps. I didn't know it then, but Pauline's doorbell cam had captured the entire exchange, every word, every threat. That tiny red light above her door would soon become my shield. By March, the foreclosure process was officially filed. The bank began calling me daily. The manager, polite but firm, explained that as cosigner, I was responsible unless I could prove financial misconduct. That word stuck with me. Misconduct. So I started digging. I logged into my online banking history. Every automatic transfer to CJ and Rocky, every emergency payment, every subscription I'd covered for their household. It was all there, a graveyard of generosity. Then I noticed something odd. IP logs, repeated access to my account from a location tagged Maple Ridge Estates. My heart stopped. They had been checking my balance for years, calculating exactly how much they could ask without bankrupting me. That night I printed everything. Pages upon pages of transactions, timestamps, login data. I stacked them in neat piles on my kitchen table. The hum of the printer filled the silence like an engine of truth. When I was done, I stared at the evidence, the anatomy of betrayal. I wasn't angry anymore. Just steady, cold steady. The next day I walked to the community legal aid office and asked for an appointment. That's how I met attorney Miguel Arroyo. He was calm, meticulous, with kind eyes that seemed to see straight through excuses. Financial coercion, he said after I told him everything. It's more common than you'd think. I nodded. I don't want revenge. I just want my name off that loan. He smiled faintly. Then let's start building your case. I didn't know it at the time, but that meeting was the start of my second life. Over the next few weeks, I learned what it felt like to live with purpose again, not as a giver, but as a witness. Arroyo worked methodically, requesting every document I had. We need proof of manipulation, he said, tapping his pen against the desk. Patterns, signatures, timestamps, the paper trail of control. He didn't know that was my native language. I had spent decades organizing other people's messes. This time, the mess was mine, and I intended to clean it properly. I built binders, labeled them by year, printed every transaction, every fake emergency, every text that began with "Mom, can you?" Each page told a story not of generosity, but of slow erosion. I highlighted the entries that matched the IP log from Maple Ridge. The data didn't lie. They'd been inside my account for years. When Arroyo saw it, he leaned back impressed. You're better organized than most auditors I've worked with. I used to manage receipts for 5 office floors, I said. Turns out it was training. In April, he introduced me to Daniel Whitman, a compliance officer from the bank. Whitman wore crisp suits and carried a tone that could cut marble. We reviewed your son's account access, he said during our first meeting. What they did borders on fraud. If we confirm the misuse of your authorization, we can petition to remove you from liability. That word remove was a balm I didn't know I needed, but winning on paper didn't mean peace in real life. CJ's messages escalated. Then came Rocky's. The tone shifted from desperation to rage. You're not just hurting us, Mary, one voicemail hissed. You're hurting your grandkids. How do you sleep knowing that? I slept fine. For the first time in years. In May, I walked past a thrift shop downtown and stopped at the window. There, among secondhand trinkets, was a small porcelain angel. One wing cracked, the other intact. I bought it for $3 and placed it on my kitchen table beside Walter's photo. It reminded me that broken things could still be beautiful as long as they weren't pretending to be whole. Then one morning, Pauline knocked on my door holding a flash drive. You'll want this, she said. My doorbell cam caught something the night they came yelling. She plugged it into my laptop. The footage was clear. CJ's voice, Mom opened up, sharp and panicked. Rocky's sneer. You think ruining us makes you holy. Then Pauline's calm voice cutting through. Smile, dear. You're on camera. Arroyo's eyes lit up when he saw it. That's intimidation. We'll use it. By early June, the cracks in their perfect life became canyons. Friends stopped visiting. Neighbors whispered about foreclosure. Rocky's social media turned eerily silent. No brunch photos. No matching outfits with the kids. Then came the final insult, a public fundraiser she created online. The caption read, Help our family survive my mother-in-law's betrayal. It was surreal watching strangers donate money to the people who'd called me a loser. I didn't comment. I didn't defend myself. Silence was sharper than any response. One night, CJ showed up again, not at my door this time, but at my work. I found him waiting near the lobby. After my shift, eyes red, breath uneven. Mom, please, he said, blocking my way. They're taking the house next week. You can stop this. I already did, I replied. 5 years ago when I said yes. He stepped closer, his voice trembling. I made mistakes, okay, but you can't just erase family. I'm not erasing you, CJ. I'm erasing the lie that's been wearing your face. For a moment, he just stood there, stunned. Then quietly, You've changed. Yes, I said, and it's about time. That night I went home, poured myself a cup of tea, and opened the window. The city hummed below, cars, sirens, distant laughter, life moving on, uncaring, unstoppable. I realized something simple: I didn't need anyone's apology to start healing. I only needed proof that I wasn't crazy for demanding respect. And soon I would have more than proof. I would have the truth. Because Arroyo had just called. The bank had confirmed unauthorized access to my account and fraudulent use of my co-signer authorization. The next step wasn't survival, it was confrontation. The day of the confrontation was gray heavy and windless, the kind of afternoon where even the air feels like it's holding its breath. I arrived 10 minutes early at Attorney Arroyo's office, carrying a single brown folder, my binder of proof condensed to its sharpest points. Every document had been trimmed, time-stamped, and highlighted. It wasn't anger that drove me there, it was precision. The receptionist guided me into a glass conference room. The blinds were half drawn, the light cutting through, in narrow stripes falling across the polished table like prison bars. At the far end sat Arroyo, his tie slightly loosened but his eyes sharp. To his right, Daniel Whitman from the bank, holding a thin stack of papers and a flash drive. "Are you ready for this?" Mary Arroyo asked. I nodded. "I've been ready since the night they called me a loser." A few minutes later, the door opened. CJ walked in first, wearing the same suit from his wedding, now wrinkled, the buttons strained at the stomach. Rocky followed behind, immaculate as ever, in a beige trench coat, but her face was drawn tight. Her lawyer, a man named Richard Price, trailed them, clutching a briefcase like a shield. No one spoke for several seconds. The silence was electric. You could almost hear the hum of resentment in the air. Rocky broke it first. "I hope this is quick. We have 2 kids at home who don't deserve to go through this circus." "Then perhaps you shouldn't have built the circus," Arroyo said evenly. Her mouth twitched, but she said nothing. Arroyo folded his hands. "Let's begin. Today's purpose is simple: to review financial evidence and determine whether my client, Mrs. Miriam Davenport, remains legally responsible for the Maple Ridge mortgage." Price smirked. "The mortgage she willingly co-signed." "Willingly," Arroyo repeated. Interesting word. "Let's test that." He nodded to Whitman, who slid the first document across the table, a printout of login activity from the bank's server. Dozens of entries from the same IP address, all tied to the Maple Ridge home network. "Your clients accessed Mrs. Davenport's personal banking portal at least 43 times over 3 years, Whitman said. His tone was clinical, almost bored. Each time coincided with withdrawals or new transfer authorizations. CJ blinked. "We had permission." "Not according to the logs," Whitman interrupted. "The authorization expired after the mortgage signing. Everything after that was unauthorized." Rocky leaned forward, her voice clipped. "We only checked balances. We never took anything she didn't approve." "That's not what the data shows," Arroyo said, sliding another sheet forward. "Here's a $6,000 transfer marked as a car down payment." The dealership records show the car had already been paid in full before that date. The funds went to a personal account registered under your name, Mrs. Sloan Davenport. "Would you like to explain?" Her jaw tightened. "I don't recall." "I do," I said quietly. "That was the day you told me your heater broke." CJ turned to me, eyes flashing. "Why are you doing this, Mom? You could have just come to us." "I did," I said. "For years. You just stopped listening." The room went still. Even the fluorescent light above us buzzed softer. Arroyo opened a small black case and pulled out a USB drive. "Mr. Whitman, please." Whitman inserted it into the laptop and projected the footage onto the wall, Pauline's doorbell cam video. The timestamp, January 14th, 9:42 p.m. On screen, Rocky's voice cracked through the speakers. "You think this is funny? You think ruining us makes you holy?" CJ's voice followed, loud, pleading, angry. Mom opened the damn door, then Pauline's calm warning. "Smile, dear. You're on camera." When the clip ended, you could hear the air conditioner groaning. Rocky's face had gone pale. That, Arroyo said softly, as intimidation. Recorded and verified. Price's expression shifted from smug to uneasy. "We're not here to discuss family squabbles." "This isn't a squabble," Arroyo said. "It's financial coercion coupled with digital fraud and verbal harassment, and the bank will not tolerate it." Whitman cleared his throat. "Given this evidence, Metropolitan Bank will release Mrs. Davenport from co-signer liability. The primary borrowers, Mr. and Mrs. Davenport, will assume full debt responsibility, effective immediately." The sound of Rocky's breath hitching filled the room. "You can't do that," she hissed. "You can't just wash your hands clean while we—" Whitman cut her off. "We can, and we have." CJ slumped in his chair, face buried in his hands. For the first time, I saw not defiance, but collapse. The realization that the safety net he'd built his life on was gone. I stood slowly gathering my folder. This wasn't revenge, I said. It was correction. You called me a loser, CJ. But losers don't stand back up. I did. He looked up at me, eyes rimmed red. You've destroyed us. No, I said. You did that when you forgot who built your foundation. Rocky slammed her pen onto the table. We'll fight this. You'll regret it. Arroyo smiled calm and lethal. You're welcome to try. Just remember the camera has sound. For a moment, no one spoke. The only noise was the faint whir of the ceiling vent and the shuffle of paper. Then CJ stood his chair, screeching back. Let's go, Rocky. They stormed out. The door closed hard behind them, leaving the air vibrating. I exhaled slowly. My hands were steady. For the first time in years, steady. Arroyo looked at me. You did it, Miri. I shook my head. Not yet. I just ended the first chapter. He smiled faintly. Then what comes next? I glanced at the folder in my hand, the copies of everything, the notebook, the receipts, the log timestamps. My arsenal. What comes next, I said, is rebuilding what they tried to take. My piece. Whitman extended his hand. Mrs. Davenport, congratulations. The official documents will be mailed within the week. You're free of this loan. Free. The word echoed in my head like music. When I stepped outside, the wind had shifted. The clouds had opened, and the first sunlight in days touched the wet pavement. I stopped at the top of the steps, closed my eyes, and let it hit my face. Behind me through the office windows, I could see Rocky's reflection pacing in the parking lot, phone pressed to her ear, still trying to control the narrative. But it no longer mattered. For once, the story wasn't hers to tell. As I walked toward the bus stop, I caught my reflection in a window, the same gray cardigan, the same oak leaf brooch. But something in my face had changed. My eyes didn't carry apology anymore. They carried proof. And that, I realized, was my real revenge. A week after the meeting, the envelope arrived, thick, embossed, final. Inside, the bank's letterhead declared what I had fought months to read. Mrs. Miriam Davenport is hereby released from all liability regarding the Maple Ridge mortgage. I didn't cry. I just sat in silence, tracing the embossed seal with my fingertip. It felt like touching air after years of drowning. But freedom has echoes. 2 days later, my mailbox filled again, this time with noise. Certified letters, debt notices, and one particularly desperate handwritten note from CJ. I didn't open it at first. When I finally did, it said only, Mom, she left. The kids asked for you. That night I made chamomile tea and called Dr. Hart. It's over, I said. Nothing's ever over, she replied. It just changes chapters. She was right. The next morning, Attorney Arroyo called. Mary, the bank forwarded additional findings, he said. Rocky's been renting a storage unit under your name, filled with designer items bought on your accounts. We can use that in the ongoing fraud inquiry. I smiled faintly. Let's not rush. Sometimes letting them expose themselves works better than any trial. He chuckled. You're learning the system fast. Not the system, I said. The rhythm. In the following weeks, the rhythm unfolded like a quiet symphony of consequences. Rocky tried to file for bankruptcy, under my name. The court flagged it instantly, fraudulent ID usage. CJ tried to sell the car she bought with my money, but the bank froze the title. Their perfect suburban fortress, the one I'd helped them build, was auctioned off to strangers. And yet I didn't gloat. I simply watched documenting everything in my ledger, a habit I couldn't break. Each entry wasn't revenge, it was closure by record. One evening, as the city lights flickered on, I heard a soft knock at my apartment door. When I opened it, CJ stood there looking smaller than I remembered. Behind him were two figures, Jaden and little Lila clutching stuffed animals. Can we come in? He asked. His voice cracked on the second word. I hesitated, then stepped aside. The kids ran to the window, fascinated by the view from my third-floor apartment, the same streetlights that used to comfort me on lonely nights. CJ stayed by the door, hands trembling. I don't expect forgiveness, he said quietly, but I'm asking for a chance to do better. I looked at him for a long moment. You'll have to earn it. He nodded. I know. Then, almost as if fate enjoyed timing, my phone buzzed a voicemail from Arroyo. His message was short. Police recovered the storage unit. Everything's being cataloged. You might want to come see for yourself. I turned to CJ. Do you want to know the truth? He frowned. What do you mean? I picked up my folder, the one labeled Audit My Own Gospel of Proof, and held it to my chest. You'll see soon enough. Outside, the night wind carried the faint sound of church bells, the same ones that used to toll on Christmas Eve. For the first time, they didn't sound lonely. As I watched my grandchildren fall asleep on the couch, their tiny bodies curled beneath my old knit blanket, I realized something profound. Revenge wasn't always fire and fury. Sometimes it was a calm ledger, a locked drawer, and the patience to let truth finish its own sentence. They had taken years from me, but in return they gave me something priceless: clarity. And clarity once found doesn't fade, it shines. I turned off the lights, let the glow from the city spill across the room, and whispered into the dark. They thought they'd broken me, but they just handed me the one weapon they could never control: the truth. If you've ever felt like the outsider in your own family, I want you to hear this. You are not crazy for wanting respect. You are not cruel for setting boundaries, and you are never too late to start over. For years, I thought love meant giving without question, but now I know love without respect is just a cage with pretty curtains. I lost my home, my savings, my pride, and yet in the quiet that followed, I found my voice again. So if you're sitting there tonight staring at a closed door wondering if walking away makes you heartless, it doesn't. It makes you free. And if this story reached you, if you've ever been betrayed by the ones you trusted, most hit like, share it with someone who needs courage today and subscribe. This story isn't over.